Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's midday Western U.S. regional forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I want to start by taking a look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. We have been discussing this deeper upper level trough that's been sitting in parts of the Pacific Northwest, and it has done its best to bring quite a bit of rainfall to that region for this time of year. We've had some severe weather here in parts of Montana, and some of the folks who look at this map are just saying, yes, thank you, this is exactly what we needed. I'm thinking about wheat farmers, both spring and winter wheat, who need the rain this time of year as they just prepare to harvest. But if you're a cherry farmer in parts of Washington state, some of the higher winds with some of these storms and the heavy rain have bruised and damaged the cherry crop. And this, remember, is following a bruised and damaged cherry crop that came out of California. So cherries this year are taking a beating with weather systems. Also, if you are looking at this map and you had planned over the last few days to cut some hay, alfalfa, you know that this has kind of shut you down. But if you're in between cuttings, this is great rain to help the next one get going. So that's the way it is in the Pacific Northwest. We have such an incredible variety of crops that you're always going to hear a good and a bad story every time you have weather, and that any kind of weather, and that's just the kind of the way it goes here. But if we take a look at what's really forcing this, let's just animate for you the upper level flow pattern. We have got to watch where that trough is going over the coming days, because it's still going to keep things unsettled and cool in the near term, but it is moving and it is changing, and so is the flow across the Pacific Ocean. All right, so let's get into some of the details here. We are still watching for the chances of thunderstorms across the Pacific Northwest, specifically into Montana. But you'll notice that because of where that trough is, we have more chances of storms in Oregon, Washington, Idaho again today. Once we move into the day on Saturday, that's the map that's over here in the upper right, we're going to finally start to see that upper level low eject over to the east. So now the severe weather threat translates in the northern plains. There will still be a general risk of thunderstorms in the Pacific Northwest, but our chances of some of those storms being severe is being greatly diminished. And in the day on Sunday, we're just watching this corridor right in through here for our best chance at thunderstorm activity. Now, we're going to keep looking at these maps all the time, and one of the main reasons why I show you them, plus what I showed you earlier this week about lightning for the western region, is because we were getting very concerned about how thunderstorms, especially those ones that are drier, yeah, they put down a downdraft, they put down rain, but it rarely hits the ground in some locations. Well, when that happens, they also produce a lot of lightning, and so we're starting now to get into the season where we're very worried about forest fires. So that's why we kind of covered that over the last couple of days here. But now I want to turn my attention back to the rainfall. I'm going to animate for you here the high resolution rapid refresh model. This is our highest resolution model, and it's just taking you out from early Friday morning all the way through Saturday midday. So you can see where we're expecting to see showers and thunderstorms in the northwest. So Washington state, parts of Idaho, and then specifically parts of Montana getting more showers and thunderstorms today. Now, normally this time of year, it's pretty rare to get a lot of rainfall in California, but do you notice the feature that's coming up there just west of the Baja that's moving up towards Southern California? We're going to talk about that in a few seconds here, because that's interesting. We got this little pulse of moisture coming in that direction. And I want to bring up one last thing before I change off of this animation. You can see here over the four corner states widespread scattered showers and storms tonight. This will be Friday night in that area. This is not yet induced by the monsoonal flow. We're waiting later in the season to get that monsoonal flow going, but still some widespread scattered showers and storms that could produce some localized flooding. But let's get back to that thing that's coming through parts of California. So if we now switch over to a different model, this is our NAM, North American Mesoscale model. This particular model runs out 60 hours. And now you can see that pulse of moisture coming up into Southern California, moving into Nevada, Utah, and eventually into Wyoming. Watch it again with me. So we have this very interesting feature here that could be bringing some light rain there, and then some heavier rain into those locations where the mountains can kind of enhance the lift of the air. So we're watching again this corridor right in through here once we get into Saturday evening, moving through the day on Sunday. So it's right into your Saturday afternoon, evening, moving into the day on Sunday. We're getting some more precip. But you notice as I animate this again, that the chances for precip in the northwest finally start to move out once we get into the weekend here as that upper level trough finally exits. So if we put this all together, I'm going to switch now to the European model. We're blending these models together to get a good understanding of what's going on here. Big changes are happening in the Pacific Ocean. You've probably noticed in several of my recent videos that I've highlighted this big area of higher atmospheric pressure that's kind of dominated things. Well, that higher pressure region is kind of breaking down. And as I animate this forward, we can see a kind of a wider swath of precipitation moving through this area. Now, that's just indicative of the changes that are happening across much of the western United States with the exiting of that first deep trough. Now, before I get into some of the timing, you may notice that when you look at this, where that pulse of moisture was coming up like this, the European model doesn't really show too much in the way of rainfall. It's going to be relatively light, but we're going to have to watch it anyway. But just remember, the European model is a little bit lower resolution than those two higher resolution models I just showed you. So let's back off those drawings and let's just look at some of the timing of this precipitation, okay? So let's step back right here. Now, here we are Friday afternoon, Friday evening, into Saturday morning. So you can still see the influence over that time period of the upper level trough bringing in the precip to parts of the Pacific Northwest. And in particular, we kind of watch the mountains here, the mountains there, and then we're watching in the Rockies here for some aided lift due to the mountains there, okay? Now, as we move forward, Sunday afternoon into Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning. Now watch. As we get toward the end of next week, this is next Thursday morning. Do you notice by next Thursday morning, we have a system right there we're going to have to watch carefully. So it's about a week from now. It's late next Thursday. We're going to be watching for more precipitation coming in. And so you can see it's right in through this corridor that we're going to be adding some more to this. So that change, that breakdown in the Pacific Ocean is leading toward more precipitation at the end of next week coming in. See it? So let's take a look at what the flow of the jet stream is doing so we can understand that. As we click play on this, you notice that the deeper trough that was sitting here over the Pacific Northwest, that's the blues, it slowly loses its amplitude and starts to shift a bit to the east. Now, I know you're going, wait a minute, Eric, I saw this was kind of moving this way. You do. You see a bigger feature there, but the trough that was causing the problems is actually joining up with this trough here and moving now into the north central plains. All right, see it? Now, as that happens, we, in general, still hang on to some lower heights across the Pacific Northwest, which is why we still see our cooler weather lasting into early next week. But with time, this is next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So I'm way out there. This is next. This is July the 8th, okay? We're way out here in the flow. We do see changes that are quite important. And basically the jet stream, as we've been talking about, has been advertising this flow pattern, okay? And what does that mean? Well, that means ridging will more than likely be setting up like this. I know you see some lower heights in here, but wait until I show you how the temperatures are going to respond to this particular flow pattern, okay? So looking at the total accumulated precip over the next 15 days, we're looking again at an anomaly map. The wettest regions are right in through this corridor compared to average. So we just keep seeing the precip coming into that area. Part of that is induced by this upper level trough that slides right in through this area, keeping it very stormy across the northern tier of the United States and into parts of Western Canada. But across much of the West, we're not seeing too big of a deviation from normal in terms of our precipitation. So let's get into the discussion on temperatures. What we're going to watch here is the National Digital Forecast Database, which is one of our highest resolution views of temperatures. Pick us out temperatures over the coming days. The trough is still in place in the northwest, so you see temperatures here in the 70s for the basin. As we get into Saturday, we're finally going to warm up a little bit there in the Columbia Basin where we got temperatures in the lower 80s. Getting into Sunday, peaking again there, we see temperatures in the mid to upper 80s. As we continue forward, look at the Snake River Valley and the Columbia Basin, both regions hitting, middle to upper 80s here. Now I've got you up to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. So we don't see the extreme heat that we saw early in June, but temperatures do finally rebound back toward more normal temperatures for this time of year. Moving down to California, let's take a look at what things look like down there. As we start off the day on Friday, oh, look at this. This is just amazing. A lot of mid to upper 80s across the Central Valley. As I click play on this, let's just step that back here. We see that there's Friday's temperatures, Saturdays, still upper 80s, lower 90s. As we get into the day on Sunday, it's only down in the San Joaquin Valley that we start to get into the low to mid 90s. But once we get into Monday and Tuesday of next week, we start to see the whole valley warming up here again into the lower to middle 90s. Looks like by the time next Tuesday rolls around into Wednesday, we've got down here in the San Joaquin, we're kind of flirting with those temperatures that are in the upper 90s in this region. But you notice that I'm not showing too much until we get out to maybe July the 4th, where we start to see, I don't want to call it extreme heat because I know the Central Valley of California can really deal with some heat, but we do see our temperatures here climbing back up into the middle and upper 90s by the time we get out to the 4th of July. All right. Bigger picture on temperatures, what is it going to do to our evaporation? Well, here we are looking at the next 7 days of total evaporation. We can still see values here in parts of the Pacific Northwest. They are a little bit lower than average simply because of the cooler weather that's hanging around. In the Central Valley of California, we're still talking about anywhere between 1.5 and up to 2 inches of evaporation over the next week. And then where we have much higher temperatures down here in the desert, of course, we can get well over 3 inches of evaporation. But again, these numbers are not the extreme values that we can sometimes get this time of year. And just to kind of wrap this up with a longer range outlook on temperatures, we know that our next day 6 through 10, which is over here, remember, we're still dealing with overall a flow pattern that doesn't feature big ridging. So that's why you still see temperatures quite seasonable for much of the West Coast. Getting out to days 11 through 15, we do start to see the Pacific Northwest picking up on a bit of a warm bias again. California is still quite seasonable for your temperatures, which again in the Central Valley is mid-90s. But to wrap this up, we got brand new long-range information last night. And what I'm showing you here is the 20th of July through the 27th. And there's an interesting thing we talked about in our long-range update with a trough that's developing in this area. And it may be such that with time, the flow pattern is going to be doing something a bit more like this. And that's why we're watching for the end of the month of July for a pretty, well, it's been painting a pretty consistent picture with some above average temperatures across much of the Western United States. So that's stuff I'll be researching this weekend and put it in all of our videos next week. I hope that you all have a great weekend and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.